All right. So, first of all, on our screen, we've got three empires that we're talking about this week. We have the Ottoman Empire, we have the Safavid Empire, we have the Mughal Empire. By the way, what do all three of these have in common as far as who's in charge of them? These are all Muslim-run empires. The Ottoman, the Safavid, the Mughal. The Mughal is kind of a funny exception because what's true of the majority of the people who live in the Mughal Empire? They're Hindu, right? It's a majority Hindu Muslim minority. So we talked about the Ottomans, yes, last week. Yes. That's fine. We're at the end of the day. That's fine. Yes. Oh, I will give it to you. I've done this before. So on the handout, we're looking at today on the middle one, the Safavid Empire. This is modern day, write down Iran. That's modern day Iran. We also know that there's really two choices we have regarding a religion. The two choices regarding religion in the Muslim world is you are either a Sunni or you are a what? A Shia. And actually on the board on the right, there's terms to know. These are all things that you should be familiar with. And I put Sunni/Shia, and in parentheses, as a way of reminder, I put some of the main men that you should know about what makes the Shia different. One of the names on that list is the name Ali. And you should, of course, remember that when Muhammad died, there was a bit of a question like who takes over, who's the next guy. And one group of Muslims said, you know what, we need to just like vote for the most experienced guy. We need to vote for the one who's most respected, the one that has been around from the beginning. And people voted for this guy named Abu Bakr. But then there's like other Muslims who didn't feel comfortable with that at all. And they said, no, I don't think we should like vote for this. I think you should be related to the Prophet Muhammad. And there's a guy who was related by blood. He was Muhammad's cousin and also Muhammad's son-in-law. Who's that guy? Looking at the board, Ali. Ali. And Ali, he gets to become like the fourth leader instead of the first leader, but then he dies. But then, as Lewis said, he has a son, a guy named Hussein. And the bummer about Hussein is, well, what happens to Hussein? He dies too, right? And so there's this big controversy about between Sunnis and Shias over the family of Ali. So the branch of Islam that the Safavids are, they are Shia. Make sure you have Shia down for that second blank. They're Shia. Now, it says that on the handout that Persia had a long-lasting cultural tradition. What I mean by that is that before the Safavid Empire was the Safavid Empire, it was the Persian Empire. And there was a Persian Empire like 1,000 years before Muhammad was ever born. So it's not like the Muslims created Persia. It's not like the Muslims were the first ones to come here. They have been very cultured and advanced for a long time. It says actually that Islam didn't come to Persia until about 651. 651. And that's really late because the Persians have been there. Their countries existed for 1,000 years before Muhammad was ever born. And so Islam is kind of a new thing to the Persian people, new to the Safavids. And it says on the handout that it turns out there was a religion there before Islam. And because Islam comes in, what can you predict is going to happen to the original religion of this area? Yeah, like by little, this original religion is going to give way to the new religion. And it says that Islam led to the decline. And we want to write down the original religion. It's a funny name. It's called Zoroastrianism. Now, if you don't know how to spell that, it's not on the board, but it is on the very next line. You'll see the word Zoroastrian. You'll just simply add ISM. So it's on the handout. On the handout, you'll see this Z word, Zoroastrian. You'll make it write down, make it read decline of Zoroastrianism. You just add ISM to it. And that was like the original religion. They kind of, people would often say that they worshiped fire and Zoroastrianism, and really that's not okay. Muhammad says, or the Muslims say there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. So you can't have this Zoroastrianism thrive like it did. And there's solutions to that. It says on the handout, Zoroastrianism scriptures were burned and many priests were killed. Now, time to see all the smart kids in the room, as I have some questions about this and related topics. So the argument is that Islam comes in and they start killing people who are the religious leaders. Islam comes in and they start burning books previously. So let's talk about burning of books first of all, and let's go to Roberto. Roberto, what's another situation we've studied very recently where books, religious books of a different tradition, are actually being burned? Where have we already seen that, Roberto? Oh, I'm sorry, what's your answer? Okay, that's okay because I have a feeling that we have the answer from Mr. Runnels. What's another example of like religious books being burned because they're different? They are not on the same page. We've studied it just within the last few weeks. Maybe seen a movie clip about this. Oh, that's okay because I have a feeling that Naomi Pettis is going to help me out on this. Miss Pettis, do you have any assistance for this? What's another example of like religious books being burned? Different religion. I don't agree with you. I don't like what I'm reading. Actually, it's probably better to burn this document. What's that? I don't know. Okay. Time to shine. It's Lewis's turn. What examples do we have here, Lewis? There's actually many. That's going all the way back to the Mongols. Now, I don't think the Mongols are a good example because they did burn stuff, but they didn't really actually care. It wasn't like they were offended. Like back in the Mongols, like your mom could be Buddhist, your uncle could be Christian, your aunt could be Muslim. Like the Mongols. There you go, Luther. That's the one. Because you might remember we watched this movie clip called Luther, and the Pope wrote these books and these letters saying, "Oh, Luther's terrible. Don't listen to Luther." Blah blah blah. And then Luther, I think we watched a video clip where Luther said, "They burned my books, so I will." What did he say? I'll burn theirs. So Luther being really mature in the Reformation. So he burned like Catholic books or whatever. Also, when the Spanish came, what did they find the Aztecs doing? Human sacrifices, right? And the Spanish were like, "Hey, where'd y'all learn to do this?" "Oh, you have religious books." What did they do to those Aztec books? Not all, but many of them. They burned them. So we do see this in history. Now, it also says that the Muslims killed these priests. There's two examples of this religiously in England. What are those two examples of killing people who follow the faith? Not just burning books, but killing people. Who are against the Catholic Church? Who are those? Who are those people? Protestants. Who was it who killed Protestants in England? Yeah, there's Mary Tudor. Sometimes she has an ugly nickname. She was sometimes called Bloody Mary, and she burned Protestants. But she wasn't the only one who burned people of a different religious tradition. In fact, who else did that in England? Queen Elizabeth. In fact, she killed more than her half-sister, but she doesn't get a negative name. She gets called Gloriana, the glorious one. She gets called the Virgin Queen. We get a state, Virginia, named after her. They both did this. So we see this all throughout history. And it says on the handout that in the neighborhood, it says that these other countries, like Iraq, Syria, Egypt, North Africa, everything in the northern part of Africa, in the Middle East, it says that they were, and we're going to write down the word, they were Islamized, which is the word Islam with I-Z-E-D at the end. And all these different parts of the world, they were Islamized. And take a wild guess, what change happens to your country or culture? What change happens if you've been Islamized? You become Muslim. And what's like a reason that you might become Muslim? What's just like a convenient thing about becoming Muslim? You might remember there was something called the freedom of religion tax. And like, I could still be a Christian, but I have to pay like a tax for the right to become a Christian. A lot of people said, hey, you know what? If I save some bucks, show me which way Mecca is and show me how to pray 5 times a day. So all these different areas that are in green, little by little by little, became Islamized. And it wasn't always that way, because if you and I had gone to Egypt originally, people in Egypt, like in the 300s, were Christian. If you and I went to Iraq, they were Christian. If you and I went to Syria, they were Christian. But little by little, they gave up their Christianity in Syria and became Islamized. But Islam's not the only thing that spread. When Muhammad goes to all these places, yeah, Islam spread, but what else spread? And this is pretty common. Whenever conquerors or empires, they often spread their religion, but they also spread their, a specific example, their language. Can you give me another example of an empire that spread their religion that we've already talked about recently? Well, that's not been recent. Well, so the Ottomans, yeah, because I mean they do spread Islam to the Balkan Peninsula, which is like just north of Greece, so that's true. But someone else, not people not on this map at all. Spain and Portugal. What religion did they give Mexico and Brazil and El Salvador and Peru? Yeah, like they said, hey, you're not going to be whatever religion you are. You're now Catholic, all of you. And not only religion, what else did they give the people of Mexico and Bolivia and Peru and Cuba and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? The language, right? Because you know how many Mexicans spoke Spanish in 1492? 0. The only reason they spoke Spanish was some white person said, hey, this is your language now. The only reason Mexicans became Catholics, some white person said, hey, this is your religion now. So not only did all these parts of the world in green become Islamized, but they also became, there's a second word, we'll write down Arabized, which is the word Arab with I-Z-E-D. Yes. No, you can just hand it to me. I'll agree if I can make sure you don't do any funny business. I mean, last time when you looked at it, when you were planning on taking it, that was kind of shady. But you didn't know that.
I was making sure.
Oh, that's what you were doing. Good to know. So it says it became Arabized in a remarkably short time. So very quickly, people would give up Christianity for Islam. Very quickly, people would give up their local language for Arabic. It was Arabized. It was Islamized in a short time. And their old religions, it says on the handout, were either abandoned entirely or dwindled into small minorities. Their old religions were either abandoned entirely or dwindled into small minorities. If you and I go to Egypt today, there's still Christians in Egypt, but they're only like 10% of the population. Yes, ma'am. So we have, they were Islamized and Arabized remarkably short time. And those old religions were entirely, they're abandoned entirely or dwindled in small minorities. There are still Christians in Egypt today, but instead of being 90% of Egypt, like 10% of Egypt is Christian. They're still there, but it's not like it used to be. And their old languages almost disappeared. Their old languages almost disappeared. Like even again to this day, if if you go to if you're Mexican American, I would bet probably no Mexican American in this room has a grandma that speaks a Native American religion. I would bet no one who's Cuban or Hispanic or Dominican has some great grandma that speaks to this day the language of the Native Americans. And that's what happened here too. Spanish took over and all those old religions and all those old languages faded out. It says their old languages almost disappeared. Now, some survived, it says on the handout, in scriptures. That word scripture means like holy books, and liturgies. That word liturgies means like religious rituals. And some were still spoken in a couple of remote villages, but in most places, almost all people, the previous languages were forgotten. And we see that today. No, for the most part, most Mexicans don't speak Native American language of the Maya or the Aztec, etc. For the most part, if you're Hispanic, that language of half of your DNA is gone. And it says on your handout that the identities expressed in those languages were replaced. And the ancient civilizations of Iraq and Syria and Egypt gave way to what we nowadays call the Arab world. Sorry about how small that blank is, but you'll write down what we nowadays call the Arab world. So all these places in green today, we would say that's the Arab world. But listen, if we went back, what's the name of that woman who famously ruled Egypt and she's like a famous Halloween costume? Cleopatra, right? Did she speak Arabic when she was queen of Egypt? No, like literally nobody spoke Arabic in Egypt. But when Muslims took over, they brought not just their religion, but they also brought their language. Now, what about Iran, though, or the Safavids in orange? Well, it turns out they never really start speaking Arabic, and they're kind of like different from the rest of the Muslim world. And there's different ways people have viewed Muslims conquering the Safavid, or conquering Iran, conquering Persia. It says on the handout that Arab Muslims' conquests have been seen in two different ways. One, some people see it as a blessing. Some people see it as a blessing. Some people are like, you know what, this is like the best thing that ever happened. We used to worship statues. We used to worship fire. We used to, all these different things. Man, the best thing that ever happened was Muhammad's men came and brought Islam, a blessing. It says on the handout that some saw this as the true faith. Some saw it as the end of the age of ignorance. But other people didn't quite see it that way. By others, it says on your handout, a humiliating national defeat. It was a defeat. The conquest and subjugation of the country by foreign invaders. So some people thought, man, when Islam came to Iran, best thing that ever happened. Other people came and said, you know what, Islam came to Iran, most embarrassing thing that ever happened. It says both perceptions are, of course, valid depending on your point of view. Iran was indeed, and we'll write down the word again, Islamized. That's the word Islam with I-Z-E-D added. Iran was Islamized. If you and I go to Iran today, which is Persia or the Safavid, it's this part of the world, they're 97% Muslim. So, yep, they were Islamized. They changed. They became different. But it says on your handout, it was, and sorry about the space again, I apologize, it was not Arabized. It was not Arabized. For example, on the map on the screen, everything in this red outline is the Muslim world at this time. So if you're in that red, you are a Muslim majority culture. Everything in the red. And this shows you, like, broadly the two main languages of the Muslim world. What's obviously the most common language of the Muslim world? Arabic, right? And Arabic started in Arabia, But it didn't stay in Arabia because the Muslims went to Iraq, conquered Iraq, and they brought their language. They conquered Syria, people started speaking Arabic. They conquered Jordan, people started speaking Arabic. They conquered Lebanon, they started speaking Arabic. They conquered Egypt and Sudan and Libya and Tunisia and Algeria and Morocco and Mauritania. So all these places started speaking a language they never spoke before. They speak Arabic in those places now. But who is not like the other kids? What country, biggest country, does not speak Arabic on this map?
Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan.
Yeah, so the biggest one here on this map is Iran. We've already identified that the Safavid Empire is modern day Iran. So they're for sure Muslim, but they also for sure do not speak Arabic. It says on their handout that we said they were not Arabized. Persians remain Persians, and after an eternal silence, Iran remerged as a separate two words to write in this blank: different and distinct. They were different and distinct. And we're going to talk about what makes the Safavids, what makes Iran, what makes the Persians different and distinct. We'll talk about that next. Now, the first thing that makes them different is, of course, the religion. It says on the handout, there's a guy that you should know, and his name is Shah Ismail. And Shah just really means like king. Shah here means like ruler. That's what the Shah is. And it was Shah Ismail who, it says on your handout, decided that Shia Islam would be the religion of Persia. This is the official religion. If you don't know how to spell Shia, it is on the board that says Sunni and Shia. And it's this guy, Shah Ismail, who made the call that Shia Islam would be the official religion of Persia. But we've actually already seen another example of this, where a political leader makes a religious change for his people. What's another king who decided to change the religion for his people? King Henry the Eighth. Henry the Eighth, you might recall, what did he want to get from the Pope? An annulment, right? Which means that your marriage doesn't count. You are actually a bachelor, free to get married. But the Pope said no. So Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church. And what church did he start? Church of England, sometimes known as the Anglican Church. Very good, Louis. So that's what Henry VIII did. He was a politician. He decided an official religion. You might remember, this is going a bit back, but again to Martin Luther. Martin Luther wanted to be Protestant, but bummer, he lived in a country where the emperor wasn't all about that. What country did Martin Luther live in? Holy Roman Empire. There's this guy you should know by name, Charles V. And eventually, he actually wanted Luther put on trial. He'd be cool if Luther was dead. But ultimately, there was a vocabulary word we should know called the Peace of Augsburg, where the Holy Roman Emperor said, I'll cut you a deal. You can have freedom of religion, but what that means is it's whatever the local prince decides. If your local prince is a Catholic, guess what religion you are going to be? If your local prince is a Lutheran, guess what you're going to be? A Lutheran. So it's like freedom of religion, kind of. There's a lot of examples of political leaders making religious decisions for each and every one of us. What do we have in our Constitution, though, addressing this issue of an official religion? Do we have an official religion?
No, we have freedom of religion.
Yeah, in fact, we have separation of church and state. The government cannot say we are all Methodists or Baptists or Muslims or whatever the case may be. So that is a big divide. Sunnis and Shias don't get along. And now I have a full-on whole country, the Safavids, who are officially this religion that the majority Sunnis don't get along with. It says that this would separate Persia, Iran, Safavids from the rest of the Muslim world. This will separate them from the rest of the Muslim world.
It's a little late, but what was the Persia had a long lasting at the very
Culture, cultural tradition. And that's one of the reasons they don't bail on their native language. They don't bail on their native language because a lot of the Persians think, yeah, we've been like a culture for a long time. We're not just gonna like forget our language. We may have been conquered, but we're not gonna just like forget everything that made us special. So there's another thing. Not only is the Safavids a different religion, but also they have a different language. It says on the handout that Persian is kind of interesting. It says that Persian was written using, and again, sorry about the size, using Arab script. That word script is SCRIPT, script, using Arab script. For example, this is originally what Persian looked like. This is their letters. You have A and K and Ku and Ga and Gu and D and all these different sounds. That's how Persian looked originally. But they don't use this anymore today. In fact, this is the Persian alphabet today. Now, without being expert in languages, what other languages that kind of look like? Not Chinese at all, young Americans. You broke my heart. It looks like Arabic. It looks like Arabic. In fact, here is the Arabic alphabet, 28 letters. There's the Persian alphabet, the alphabet we're talking about, 32 letters. You can see there's characters that are full-on identical, right? There's another language called Kurdish, has 34 letters. They all have the same alphabet. They're using those Arabic characters, but they're totally pronounced differently. What alphabet do we use? We use the Latin alphabet, but we're not the only language. What other languages use the Latin alphabet? French? What else? Spanish? What else? What else? What else? Not Greek, actually. Greek's an exception. Portuguese? What else? It's like Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Dutch, Welsh, Gaelic, Basque. There's like a bunch of languages, but even though we all have the same alphabet, does English and Portuguese sound virtually identical? No. And even though all three of these languages use the Arabic alphabet, they're not the same language. The what are the same?
Count the letter M, it's all a U with a dot under it.
So it's right from left.
Second to last. That one, the next one, that one, the next one, and the next one. The M.
Yeah, I don't know Arabic, so I can't tell you. I know that this is Aleph, which is A. That's all I know.
Oh, it's right to left?
It's right to left.
Also, then their V is the same. It's like this. It's like that one, and then it has a little circle. They all have the same circle. Right?
Yeah, except, yeah. Well, I mean, so much of it is the same. They all have this single stroke for Aleph, for A, and Bet is the same. Well, I don't know Arabic, so I couldn't tell you how to do it properly. If we did Hebrew, I could teach you to do your name in Hebrew, because I got a very hard-earned C in Hebrew in college. I worked hard for that, though. So that's it. It says Arabic script, and then it goes on. It goes on to say that where am I? Arabic was adopted. Arabic was adopted as a second language in Persia. As a second language. So pretty much everyone, of course, speaks Persian in the Safavid Empire. But a lot of people said, you know what? I'm going to pick up Arabic on the side. Why? What benefit could I, as a Muslim, have in learning Arabic? I might communicate with other countries. In fact, it is true the Indian Ocean Trade Network is dominated by Muslims. A lot of them speak Arabic, but there's something else that might help me as a Muslim in the Persian Empire, the Safavid Empire. If I knew Arabic, another benefit me being a Muslim knowing that. I can read the Quran. FYI, the most perfect book ever written is the Quran. And they often say you can only really understand it if you read it in Arabic. I might want to understand it. Another thing about being a Muslim is what do you have to do 5 times a day?
Pray.
You have to pray, and you don't pray in your language. Like if you're a Muslim in France, you don't pray in French. If you're a Muslim in the United States, you don't pray in English. You pray in Arabic. No matter what language you speak, the prayers are fixed. The prayers are pre-written, and you have to memorize them. And they're in Arabic, so you might want to know that, right? So these are reasons why Persians, they grew up speaking Persian, but they also pick up Arabic as a second language. Below that, it says Persian was. We'll write down Persian was not adopted by the Arab world as a second language. Persian was not adopted by the Arabs as a second language. I'll give you an example. By the Arabs as a second language. I'll give you an example. Let's say my grandpa, well, he did. He moved from Mexico to the United States. He moved from Chihuahua to the United States. My grandpa grew up speaking what if he grew up in Chihuahua? Spanish, right? What second language did my grandpa pick up as he lived the majority of his life in the United States?
English.
English, right? Now, though my grandpa and millions of other Hispanics moved here and have Spanish and picked up English, how many white people do you know have picked up Spanish fluently? They speak English and then they added Spanish to their language. How many white people do you know fluently speak Spanish in your personal life?
3, 4.
Like that, I mean, I know one, and that's like my wife. She knows infinitely more Spanish than I do.
Oh, that'd be fluent?
I'm saying, yeah, fluent. Not like they took Spanish 2 at Laporte and figured out Selena gets killed at the end. You know, like, that's all I learned. Yolanda was bad. You know, good thing I took 2 years of Spanish.
Like one?
I know one. It's my wife, you know. In the same way, here, most of the people in green in the Arab world have no interest in learning Persian. They're like, I'm not going to learn Persian. You learn my language. I'm not going to learn yours. And many white Americans, similarly, have no interest in learning Spanish. You know, can I take ASL instead? You know, can I do anything not to take that? So there is a divide here. Persians are okay learning Arabic. Arabs have no interest in learning Persian. It says on the handout that Persian-inspired Islam would help introduce Islam to India, which we'll talk about India Wednesday, hopefully. We'll talk about the Mughal. They helped introduce Islam to India. Finally, last 3, and then we're done, and we're going to stop. It says Persian architecture. Now, we've actually talked about Islamic architecture before. Because they're Muslims, what are things they cannot have in Muslim architecture? No statues, because they would argue, if you have a statue, what are you probably just going to do to a statue? Yeah, and that's a no-no. No worshiping. But I don't want, like, a plain white building. So what are some things I could do to spice it up a bit? Why geometry? Cool shapes. And also they would argue there are rules to geometry. Like there's laws. And they would say every time you've ever had a law, there's a lawmaker. Who invented the law that a squared plus b squared equals c squared? No, not Muhammad. It's not like geometry started in the 600. Like we never knew there was triangles until Muhammad was born. I mean, that's the real. Guess what? There was triangles and circles before the year 600. It's not like Jesus was like, oh, one day there'll be a circle. But for now, they would say God made all those laws of mathematics. So we'll write down Islamic architecture. Persian architecture included geometry. Something else, though. Geometry. Yeah. In fact, what do we call that? Where we have fancy writing.
Calligraphy.
Yeah. In fact, if you look here, look at this dome. There's geometric patterns. You may not be able to see it so hot, but right here, this is Arabic. This is verses from probably what? Yeah. Here we have geometry. We have verses in Arabic. We have these 2 elements. And by the way, what color theme do we see in this one and the previous one? Yeah, blue's a big one. Geometry's big, and verses are big. Take a look at this. What color? Geometry. And verses from the Quran on the top. Take a look at this one. What color? Blue. And there's some, lighter shades or whatever, maybe it's a little yellow, but there's verses of the Quran, there's geometry, there's blue, and this is tile, by the way. This is tile. This is all Safavid architecture. Here we have geometry. We have verses from the Quran. We have tile. We have the color blue. And take a look. In Mexico, what's the color theme we have here? We have blue. We have geometry. We have tile. Why is Mexican culture sometimes have some of the same things Islamic culture has? Because Spain for 700 years was conquered by Muslims. So not only did Muslims give Spanish a lot of words, a lot of expressions come straight from Arabic. In Spanish, there's, my Spanish is terrible, so don't judge me. But there's an expression where you say, ojalá que, and it means like God willing, something's going to happen. How do you say the word God in Arabic? Allah. So this Spanish term, ojalá que, hopefully that, God willing that, something will happen. You're literally in Spanish saying Allah willing. You're saying the name of the Muslim God in Spanish. You can say that as well. Last 2 lines, 2 minutes, I can do it. It says Shia Islam was characterized by the belief, and there's a term on the board called the hidden imam. The hidden imam. It's right below Sunni Shia. Hidden imam. You might remember that after Muhammad died, Ali became what was called the first imam, but Ali died. But before Ali died, you know what he told his son, Hussein? He told him all the secret good information about Islam. But then Hussein died. Guess what Hussein told his son before he died? All the secret information. And that went father, son, all the way to, you'll write down the blank, the 12th imam. And then something weird happened to the 12th imam. No, he didn't die. He disappeared. But he didn't just disappear. If you ask Shias whatever happened to the 12th imam, they would say, where is he right now? He's in heaven. But good news, he's coming back. Guess when he's coming back? End of the world. We'll write down said to return at the end of the world. Finally, there's an annual commemoration of the death of Hussein. Crowds of people, including little kids, do what to themselves to honor Hussein's death? They whip themselves, they beat themselves, they bloody themselves. That's it. We did it. I made it despite all the doubters and haters in the room. There is no homework today, other than if you have been getting zeros on work not done, then it's your chance to get caught up.